Okay, let's talk about 2XKO. So, I was one of the lucky few who actually made it into the Alpha Lab 2. And so I wanted to take some time to record my thoughts and offer my feedback. I think the overwhelming... I think the general feedback and consensus for the game is that there are definitely some issues with the game in its current state, but in general, the gameplay is really fun. And so I want to talk about why I'm personally excited about the game. Before I get started though, I do want to preface that I'm relatively new to fighting games, all things considered. I've only started playing fighting games within the last 2 to 3 years. I'm a decent player. I'm definitely not incredible by any means. My main game is Guilty Gear Strive, and I've made a Celestial a few times, but not very consistently. In 2XKO, my starting rank, they placed me in Diamond. I got knocked back down to Gold after my placements, although I did end in Platinum, which, I mean, we didn't have that long to play the game, so, you know, I do think that personally I could probably get pretty, maybe back to Diamond if I put some time into the game, but that's not really here nor there. Within the context of 2XKO, I do want to talk about why a lot of I think the current feedback is potentially not a problem, and why when I hear other people's sort of negative feedback about the game in terms of like general concerns, I personally am not very concerned. So first of all, the devs are super responsive, and we know this. We've heard them do interviews, we've heard them say time and time and again that this is their game that they're committed to making with the community. And I don't know if any of you guys have ever tried it, but game development is hard. I've tried my hand at it a few times, just, you know, as a side hobby, and it is a long process, and it takes, I mean, even when you're just trying to execute on your own vision, it takes a long time to get these things right. And so to me, it makes perfect sense that the game is taking a while to come out, especially given their commitment to listening to player feedback and making adjustments accordingly. Now, I do agree that they could be doing that while the game is out, but I also understand that, you know, a new game only is, you know, the most hype when it's released. And if you don't nail the release, it can be really hard to get people's attention back into the game. So I can understand the sentiment of wanting to take your time and nail the initial play test of the game. That being said, I do have a lot of faith in Riot as an iterative dev studio. We've seen it with League of Legends, we've seen it with all sorts of their other IPs where, you know, they release with, you know, certain level of polish and then just continue to refine it over many years. I mean, TFT took a couple seasons before it really took off. Same with, you know, League of Legends and other, you know, other of their IPs. So honestly, I have no doubt that the game will be good eventually. It's just, you know, when we offer feedback, it's more of just a question of how do I feel about this current version of the game and sort of the design choices that they've made within this current scope, and whether we want to, you know, for them to continue down this road or maybe make some small course corrections. But that being said, I'm on this boat. I think we're gonna get there, and I think the game is already in a great spot. So I'll start with a couple positives that I really appreciate. First of all, the core gameplay is still an absolute blast. Compared to any other fighting game I've played, which have only been a few, but I mostly enjoy like anime fighters, I still think the amount of diabolical crap you can do in this game is sky high. I just think it's so cool just to watch the insane things that you can do. It does just sort of feel like things, whenever I see something new, my mind is absolutely blown. And that kind of, like, I don't know, I've been watching a lot of the new game that's coming out, which is the City of the Wolves, and it just hits so different, where like even like the coolest thing that you can do in that game, in my opinion, does not compare to even sort of like the most bread and butter stuff you can do in a tag fighter. Again, I'm relatively new to all this, but this is my opinion as somebody who is relatively new to this and might have slightly different opinion than someone who's been in this scene for a long period of time. That being said, the second thing that I really love about this game is character uniqueness and complexity. So one game that I think of when I think of a game that absolutely nailed character uniqueness and complexity in a small roster is actually Rivals of Aether 1. To be honest, I feel like the characters in that game were more mechanically interesting and more diverse than even a game like Smash Ultimate, and I do come from a Smash background. So, you know, Smash Ultimate has like 80 something characters, but so many of them are basically carbon copies of each other. And so to have a game where each character feels so fleshed out, where there's so many small nuances that you can sort of tinker with, I really think that it cannot be overstated how well the design team has done in making sure that each of these characters feel so different from each other despite having similar mechanics, and each character feels like it really has a deep pool of tricks that you can dig into. Even a character like Darius, I was watching one of the developers play in a lobby and just spectating their match, and he was doing stuff with Darius that I was like, holy crap, you can do that? I mean, I was losing my mind. It was very cool. So yeah, that being said, I know that the current launch roster is only going to be 10 characters. To me, I feel like that is honestly plenty to give us time to chew into, especially because of the way I feel about each team of characters feeling completely unique. I mean, I played against like Braum Ari, which feels completely different than playing against Braum Malawi, which also feels completely different than playing Braum Jinx. And yes, Braum is in all three of those comps, but all of them play in unique ways and have different strengths and weaknesses, and these blends of combos together, to me, they feel completely fresh and different to play against. And you might say, well, all of them have Braum, but you know, Braum plays a different role. You know, I play Yasuo, I would play a different role depending on what character I'm partnered with. So anyway, the next positive that I would say is that there were some complaints that Alpha 1 was pretty stale in terms of gameplay, like just rerouting into the same combos over and over again. I did agree, and I do feel like this Alpha Lab was much better, although I do think that there's still work to be done. And I know that then certain combos were sort of like taken out, but I hope that they continue to iterate on creative routing and giving us incentives to do slightly different combos in different scenarios. So I do think that that is definitely a step, maybe even 2 steps in the right direction. New system mechanics are welcome. I'm totally fine with the teching in directional teching and stuff. Again, I come from a Smash background, so totally used to like tech chasing and things like that. I do think there might be a little bit more vulnerability if you choose to do a directional air tech, as I feel like sometimes it's a little bit too easy to tech aggressively inwards and then try and come down with a button, which I don't know. The state of anti-airs in this game currently are personally, I feel like not quite as powerful as I'd like them to be, but anyway, as long as we can preserve a good sense of rock, paper, scissors on these defensive options, I think it's probably fine. Okay, so a lot of positive things. You know, I really think that we could talk more about positives, but I'll talk about some of the negative feedback that I have, maybe more just either personal gripes or things that I think are maybe need to be slightly tweaked so that we can make sure that we're hitting the right target. So couple things that really irked me specifically. So the first that I'll talk about is things that like feel like they should work but just don't a lot of the times. So again, I'm a Yasuo player. There's a couple setups where I did, and maybe I'll play some footage right now, where you would do like what you do a setup and try and level 3 them, and for some reason the level 3 would just randomly whiff. It looks like it should hit and then it just like doesn't. And so things like that, where like I feel like you could just tweak that to make sure that, you know, things just sort of work a little bit better, slightly more consistent hitboxes on certain things. As I mentioned earlier, 2 HP in the dedicated anti-air. I mean, even in the first Alpha Lab, some of the anti-air hitboxes just felt a little wonky. Like it just didn't feel good to hit them. Again, I come from Strive, so you know, having like a very nice 6P, which sort of like always works as a dedicated anti-air, and other games have 2Hs. You know, Grand Blue Fantasy has a 2H anti-air. And yeah, you do sort of have to work around certain hitboxes, but most of the time they're pretty generous. And I definitely had some instances where it looked like it should have hit with the 2H, but because it was like slightly above you and behind your head, that the anti-air just doesn't work, and that feels really bad. So that's the first one. The second one are things that I feel like are unnecessarily hard. So this was a gripe I also had with the first Alpha Lab, which is parry punishing. I really don't understand why we need to dash cancel the parry. You already have to risk meter and time it properly to get the parry off, and man, I can't tell you how crappy it feels to get that hard read, parry something, and then because you didn't dash cancel properly, you just don't get any punish out of it at all, maybe just one hit and that's it. So I really don't understand why we can't just make parry a bit easier to punish, where like if I hit the parry, I should just get the world, like, right? You know, I think about Red RC from Guilty Gear, where you have like all day basically to punish something like that. You know, you're basically, you have to risk the meter, right? This is not something free that you can just throw around. So anyway, that's a personal gripe. You know, you could say skill issue, right? But like for a new player who, you know, there's definitely situations in the game where it's like it's kind of checkmate unless you parry it. And if you're gonna have situations where that's the case, where parry is not just like a fancy extra thing that's not really required, if you're gonna force your players into a situation where like, oh, if you don't parry this, you're checkmated. If they actually get the parry, but then, you know, somehow don't get the dash cancel, it doesn't need to be that complicated. Same goes for anti-airs, like I already talked about, and then also burst punishes, or break punishes, I guess I should call it. If a character, you know, breaks and you block it, the wall bounce. Personally, I think it's a little bit of a bummer that you can only get an air combo. It'd be nice if you could get a grounded combo as well, but that's a personal opinion. Everybody has already talked about the timeouts. I personally think that's a pretty easy fix. I don't think that's like a big deal, to be honest. Like you can tweak a few numbers here and there. They have a lot of dials they can tweak to make sure that timeouts don't happen as often. So yes, there were a lot of timeouts. That should be a super easy fix for the game. Another really big, really annoying thing that I hope they fix, which is Fury Burst, or Fury Break. I'll tell you, if you bait a delayed Fury Break and just lose your turn, that feels awful, because unless they're breaking out of a combo, it's red and it's plus on block, and that feels awful. Like, I was successful in baiting out this defensive option from you. I feel like I should get a punish, but then all of a sudden I'm minus on block because, you know, anyway, that I think, personally, I think that maybe a fix would be that if you Fury Break in the air, it shouldn't be plus on block, because most of the time you're breaking out of a juggle situation. If you want to do it and keep it so that it's plus, just make them do it on the ground or something. I think of it as sort of akin to Wild Assault or something in Guilty Gear, where, you know, yeah, you can spend your burst meter to be aggressive. That's fine, but you can't do it out of like a defensive scenario, right? Like you can't Wild Assault while you're getting punished or comboed, right? And if somebody blocks it, you're still minus, right? So like, anyway. I personally think that that's one of the big things that they need to fix. I understand that it was kind of a fun idea to give players another way to like have a comeback factor with this Fury stuff, but I don't think it's it. Oop, sorry, kitty crying at me. Okay, so lots of bugs that need to be fixed. I can definitely let those slide as long as these things are, you know, resolved by launch. And then let's talk about ranked lobbies or lobbies in general. So here's the deal. Everything hinges on player density, right? And this is a thing that I think a lot of players aren't saying, which is if there's a lot of players, if there's a lot of matches and matches are fast, then this experience that the devs are talking about, where you don't need to go into, you know, training mode, you can just sort of like walk into a lobby and get matches instantly. If that's truly the case, I get it. That's totally fine. But here's the thing. If it's not like that, then you have a huge problem. It is so much riskier to go all in on this particular route and assume that everything is going to be fine, right? Because if it's not, again, we've had plenty of experience. When on the first day I got in, I went into that diamond lobby to do my rank placements matches, and it was just empty. I sat around for a couple minutes and nobody came in because everybody was playing casuals, and that just that's not cool, man. Like, that's not okay. So, you know, whatever you need to do to resolve that, whether it's, you know, cross lobby play, which they talked about, or, you know, just implementing a standard ranked queue where you don't get to like see your opponent, but you know, you get matched with them and so on and so forth. Anyway, again, it all just hinges on how many players are in the game, and do you expect it to be, you know, a constant flow of players? Because in a lot of other fighting games, eventually the population of the player base sort of dwindles over time, and the harder it is to find matches, then like that's just not fun. You know, I got super into DNF Duel a year after it launched, when they finally fixed the game, and it was such a fun game. To be honest, my buddy and I played it for like 2-3 weeks, and then I just had to quit because literally could never find any matches outside of, you know, custom lobbies or Discord, and I just wanted to like just go in there and grind ranked mode. And so, you know, that is definitely an experience which will kill a game. So do they want to risk that? I don't know. If you want to stick to your guns, that's fine, I guess, as long as things work out. But I'm just saying it's dangerous. There's like definitely downsides to doing things like that. Okay, input changes. I would love the option to choose between 2-2 and a special button plus a normal button for your supers. I get it for peripherals, but as a hitbox player, 2-2 is not that bad for me, and I definitely have accidentally supered in the past playing Yasuo, because I'm doing like down stance into a normal follow-up, and if I plink it too fast, I'll get a super, and that's not fun, obviously. So replacing that with a down input, you know, I think you should just have the option to choose. I mean, it was in the game before, you know, you can default to whatever you want. As long as I have the option to choose, that would be pretty cool. And then the other thing is, as everyone has said, there's literally just one too many buttons. The fact that we have 2 special buttons is hard, because you want to map parry, you want to map grab, you want to map, you know, other things as well. And so I don't know how to resolve that, to be honest with you. But I definitely feel the pain. Right now I don't have grab mapped. I'm using you know, medium plus heavy to do grab, and it's not my favorite. I'll do it if I have to, but it's not my favorite. So I don't know, maybe we can figure out a solution to that, reuse buttons somehow or something, but still not the most fun. Okay. So, closing thoughts. Once again, I think the game is going in a good direction. I do still have a lot of faith in these developers to get this right. And honestly, if they can't get it right, then I'm not sure who else can, because they are by far the most communicative and most open to feedback developers that are in the industry right now. And if they can't do it, then your standards might be unrealistic, right? If that, like, I don't know what more you really want. So yeah. And then in terms of the rank stuff, you know, I respect the devs for sticking to their guns. They want to create a particular experience, but I think erring on the side of caution may be wise when it comes to ranked mode and lobbies and stuff like that. Maybe keeping lobbies for just casual gameplays. I don't know. Maybe that would be the smart thing. And then obviously fix the bugs, please. And then, you know, specifically maybe lowering the complexity on certain counterplay aspects, you know, parry, punishes, anti-airs, things like that. You know, again, the argument could be made, hey, it's just a skill issue, but I think for me, if you made the right decision to choose the correct option out of the rock, paper, scissors, I feel like the follow-up shouldn't be unnecessarily complex, if that makes sense. Like, if I got my anti-air, I should be able to do a standard combo, or if I got my parry, I should be able to do like a standard combo, stuff like that. Personal opinion, feel free to disagree. Anyway, let me know what you guys think, if you have disagreements, or if you know, how you feel. But yeah, hope you guys enjoyed my thoughts, and I will hopefully see you guys around for more news soon. All right, take care. Peace out, y'all.